Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. Well, there's a lot going on in the world, Carl, a lot of real serious stuff, and we're going to take a stab at bringing about some hope about a way to reconcile a lot of what's going on. We're going to talk about how Creator reveals how to get miracles from collective prayer. I think this is a very, very important topic.
It is. And a lot of people have one perspective of this, sort of going to a mass gathering that's prearranged and then praying, as a congregation. And of course, churches do this on a regular basis, mosques, synagogues, and so on. But the way the divine realm works is when people pray, it sort of collects them up. It gathers them up energetically. So people can be scattered and unknowing one another in remote locations. And if they're all praying for the same thing, it will count and it will be additive. And the divine realm gathers firepower to use to combat a problem that people have in common. So this is the one thing people can do always to help their situation or their fellow humans is prayer work. So we want to really highlight the fact this actually does work. It's a function of how many people participate, but that's the only limiting factor.
Absolutely. We're after results here with the Get Wisdom Project, and so that's what we're going to really look at, results. We have a really interesting example for the first question to Creator. A mass prayer asked for by General Patton in World War II. That's a kind of a surprising individual to to examine in terms of this kind of topic. But here we go, Carl. This will be interesting. General Patton had a chaplain prepare a weather prayer that was handed out to the 250,000 troops involved in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. The prayer read as such: Almighty and most merciful Father, we humbly beseech Thee of Thy great goodness to restrain these immoderate rains with which we have had to contend. Grant us fair weather for battle. Graciously hearken to us as soldiers who call upon Thee, that armed with Thy power we may advance from victory to victory and crush the oppression and wickedness of our enemies and establish Thy justice among men and nations. Amen. Did this one prayer turn the tide? What would the likely outcome have been if the Germans succeeded in their plan to destroy the port of Antwerp, the only fully operational seaport on the entire European coastline at the time, and which was critical for supplying the Allied war effort on the mainland?
All right, so this is a prayer that we ask Creator of all that is, and through a channeled answer, this is what Creator said. This prayer was of substantial benefit, and as you can appreciate from our prior tutorials on prayer, we can parse things quite finely to act on those things appropriate and disregard those that may not be. We understand humans are variable and are not in a state of perfection. We cannot support the killing of humans by anyone, but that is not to say we cannot support the survival of a group of soldiers in battle. This prayer was instrumental in turning the tide in that theater of war to favor the Allies by a suspension of the inclement weather that was bogging things down and preventing air attacks to support the ground troops effectively. The port in question was also instrumental to the war effort on the part of the Allies, and everything would have unraveled if that were impaired. So this was a key turning point in the European campaign to win the war. There were many such events when prayer factored into things and gave the Allies an advantage. But again, this was not to aid the slaughter of the enemy. It was to aid those on the side of right to preserve their lives. They then made the choice to engage in combat, and for which they paid a price karmically. That price will continue for all of the players involved, directly and indirectly, and in particular those members of the extraterrestrial alliance participating in the creation of the conflict in the first place, and the prolonged agony that resulted, extending even to this very day.
I think this is a historical example that most people aren't aware even took place. And we have confirmation from Creator that this turned the tide. Prayer actually changed the outcome of the war.
Yes, and we get this feedback on a regular basis about all sorts of things. When hurricanes aren't as terrible as was feared, or they change direction inexplicably away from causing harm. This is often Creator's handiwork in answer to prayers. Lots of people launching prayers in like measure, wanting a certain outcome, and added together, given intention for the divine to act in a powerful way on their behalf. There's no limit to what God can do. The limit is what humans can do, because we can only get a divine intervention in proportion to human requests for that to happen. This is a lesson people need to learn and to act on.
Absolutely. We're going to parse that a little more finely, as Creator suggested in the previous channeling. General Patton supplied a precise weather prayer to more than 200,000 individuals, asking for a very specific outcome that the divine was able to, in fact, provide. Suppose instead he simply asked his men to pray for good weather, and further suppose that the exact same number of people who actually prayed Patton's prayer from his printed card instead offered their own sincere, heartfelt prayer with the same level of belief and sincerity, but the prayers themselves would have been authored by each individual rather than one author. Assuming that all else was equivalent, how critical was it that everyone was focused on the exact same prayer?
All right, and this is what Creator says. Well, this was not a perfect strategy, given that the prayer itself was not a perfect script. It was close to being so, other than the inevitable liability of wanting to create conditions to make an act of war successful, resulting in deaths of human beings. While that is non-divine, there are greater and lesser evils, and there are times when humans fighting for survival and for the truth of the divine may take matters into their own hands and put their own lives at risk, requiring defending against or even carrying out an attack against enemy forces in order to win the day and prevail. So there are times we support such endeavors because the greater good ends up being served. And to allow things to take their course without divine intervention would mean the annihilation of humanity altogether. In other words, an outsized victory by the darkness compared to what we could do in support of maintaining more of a fair contest based on human requests, to not violate our charter and seeing that humans remain responsible for their world and their own destiny, whether success or failure. To have everyone focus on the same prayer wording creates a very, very powerful combined intention. To have that many individuals expressing the same desires and outcomes becomes exceptionally powerful because this rarely happens. Even when humans want basically the same thing, using different wording and differing levels of intensity as a consequence, and in particular, different levels of specificity as to what is being requested and why, there will be a kind of collective of human intentions in play that will not align and therefore become diffused and lose power overall. It is the difference between creating a sword of steel or a kind of nebulous cloud that disperses the energy enough to prevent it from coalescing in a more intensive and powerful place all at once. So the brilliant inspiration of this strategy is what helped General Patton be successful with his military campaign.
That just speaks volumes. A man steeped in military strategy, history, the whole nine yards. But the most important weapon that he even realized in his own life was the divine realm and asking for intervention.
Well, there you go. And historically, chaplains have accompanied troops in battle, at least for the United States forces. And I have talked to many veterans who've commented on how that gave them support, helped them emotionally, of course, and also to stand strong under the most extreme and difficult conditions. And they came to believe that the prayers they launched were helpful for them. And yes, especially, praying for yourself, when there's only yourself in the moment, at least, that the divine has to take care of, can be very, very effective. If one person prays for the entire world, that prayer has to be spread out over the masses and it gets diluted. That's why mass prayer is needed for mass benefits, because there's so many who don't pray. And you can imagine how people pray and how their views are scattered and imprecise. And many of them pray with little belief, and that weakens things dramatically too.
Well, that was certainly the object lesson of this example, a prime one indeed. You asked Creator, how surprised and confounded was the extraterrestrial alliance when the weather broke in favor of the Allies, enabling them to win the Battle of the Bulge, where Patton had asked his Third Army to pray for good weather? Was the extraterrestrial alliance using weather modification? Did their equipment malfunction, or was it simply impotent inexplicably? Were any individual extraterrestrial alliance members blamed and punished for the failure?
All right, this is what Creator says. In fact, you are hitting on something very special here that is unknown entirely about this episode in the war. The area in question that was the scene of a decisive battle was being protected by inclement weather that was indeed generated by the extraterrestrial alliance to support the German army. This was so they could have a breather when their opposing forces were unable to maneuver or advance because there would be no possibility of air cover, and they were no match for the German panzer divisions and the large number of troops deployed and a very effective defensive stronghold provided by the terrain. When the weather did not hold, this came as a total surprise and was extremely puzzling to the extraterrestrials. And they simply assumed something had gone wrong and endeavored to trace it to its origin, but could not. So there was no harm and no foul in the sense they had no one to blame. It was an inexplicable seeming chance event that somehow unraveled their safety net and led to a major turning point in the war. This was due to divine interference with their technology to render it ineffective, but this was untraceable. This is a particular characteristic of divine intervention, that it is hidden from view and not able to be inspected by the interlopers to trace the circumstances back to see what was set in motion and by whom to change things to work against them.
I have to say, one of the things that makes me the most grateful to be involved in this project is bringing forward new insights and new information like this one, where Creator says you are hitting on something very special here that's entirely unknown about the episode of the war. Wow.
Well, we've talked a number of times about the fact there is an extraterrestrial alliance, a dark one. They're actually running the world behind the scenes. I'm not crazy. This isn't a paranoid fantasy. There's abundant evidence of this.
Yes,
that's the reason there's so many UFO abductions, UFO sightings. They still go on. They're just not talked about in the news anymore. It's not considered news, and that's suppressed. There's a lot of shenanigans happening. And they were behind, we're learning here, they were behind World War II, the ETs.
Yes.
They like to get humans killing one another. They modify the weather for their own purposes, and they're doing it to harm us right now, hitting us from all directions with wildfires, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, on and on and on, droughts and floods and untimely, unseasonable cold weather and wet weather and droughts. So the fact this was an important factor in World War II is no big surprise for me. They were helping the Axis powers.
Absolutely. Absolutely they were. We're going to continue looking into that. So you asked Creator, the Battle of Midway was another seemingly miraculous outcome when things looked gloomy and the odds of victory seemed quite remote. But against all odds, it could be argued that the entire outcome of the war in the Pacific was ultimately decided on that singular fateful day. Did prayer make a difference in the outcome?
All right, and Creator tells us prayer was a significant factor. It contributed on multiple levels to maintaining an element of surprise, to helping the American forces perform in an exceptionally skillful fashion with good coordination and tight precision among their forces, and to be particularly effective in seeking out the installations needed to be curbed and countered effectively to tip the balance of power in the area decisively. That was indeed accomplished and was simply helping one side perform with excellence and the other side to be more complacent through a kind of distraction of their own making by simply rendering less effective some of their ardor to be prepared and on high alert. This had to do as well with confusing some of the orders for their forces on maneuvers to be placed in locations that were unfavorable in allowing a counterattack or a rapid defensive rescue for their installations on the island. And this allowed the sea attacks to be especially effective in neutralizing the Japanese power base in the Pacific.
You also asked Creator, if the amount and quality of prayer said by Americans before Pearl Harbor had equaled the amount said afterward, but prior to the Battle of Midway, is it likely that the entire war with the Japanese might have gone quite differently?
And Creator tells us this is quite true because the American forces were comprised of a high percentage of religious individuals. And this was true of their leadership as well. The many chaplains serving the installations both on land and at sea held regular services and conducted many prayers associated with missions. And this was a decisive factor for enabling eventual Allied success in the Pacific. If there had been more intensive prayer work done prior to the Pearl Harbor attack, that might have been prevented altogether, or its devastating effects minimized by having a greater vigilance and a more effective scouting and communication to reveal the threat of an attacking fleet heading towards Hawaii. And the devastating loss of men and materiel on that single day of attack could have been prevented altogether. So the balance of power would have been in favor of America from the outset, instead of being delayed for many, many months because of the huge losses at the very outset.
Wow, there's so many lessons in these channelings. You know, the one just previous to this one essentially showed how Creator favored one side simply by assisting them with their precision and their coordination, and basically left the other side alone to some extent. You know,
yes.
And that was enough to just sway the outcome.
Well, we have a battle of a different kind going on right now with the coronavirus, and that's the point of this show, because we want to get into how one deals with such a thing, and we're going to talk more about that specifically. But we're using these examples to show prayer can turn the tide under the most dire of circumstances.
Indeed. And collective prayer in particular. That is really the focus of this. Be sure to check us out at getwisdom.com and get our prayer book, our prayer ebook, which will show you how to pray most effectively, including all the little tips and things that we'll be sharing in this episode. You can get that at getwisdom.com/prayer. Also check out the Lightworker Healing Protocol. Get our ebook on the LHP. You can get that at getwisdom.com/LHP. And also check with us at getwisdom.com. Become a participant member. It is eternally free. And with that membership, you can listen to hundreds of hours of content, video, audio, download more ebooks. It's all there waiting for you. Come on in and participate. And we'll be back with more Get Wisdom right after this. Welcome back to the second segment of this week's Get Wisdom. We are talking about the power of collective prayer and how the power of that prayer can turn the tide in ways that really are miraculous.
Yes, indeed. And we're at a turning point in history right now.
We are
where
indeed.
This could be helpful.
Yes, it's basically what needs to happen, I believe. And that's why we're taking it upon ourselves to get this message out to everybody who can hear it and pass it on for themselves. You ask Creator, the suggested prayer for the coronavirus crisis is to ask for its actual removal from Earth. The Spanish flu is one of the worst pandemics in the history of humanity, yet it came to a rather abrupt end and never returned. Did the divine realm actually remove it from Earth in response to human prayer? Was it intended at the time on the part of the extraterrestrial alliance to wipe out all of humanity? Did they consider it a failure? And is that why they have not attempted to reintroduce it?
And Creator tells us, in response to the question, at that point in time, they were not intending to cause a total annihilation, simply a massive event to thin the herd, so to speak, to trim back the human population substantially so things would be more easily managed. They have flirted with similar organisms since, but have run into more trouble due to better human preparedness and greater understanding of viral diseases. So there are better public health procedures and other containment and therapeutic strategies that have been honed over the intervening years. They simply think they now have something superior that is a new organism altogether and has a unique profile as well. So they will have the advantage in unleashing this complete unknown on the world. And all the time delay in figuring out the basic behavior and characteristics of the new scourge and understanding the points of vulnerability will take some time. And this will favor the extraterrestrial alliance because they will have a free hand until human forces become mobilized. But it will be quite some time before any effective countermeasure is developed. In the meantime, the odds are greatly in favor of the extraterrestrial alliance that this will be a highly effective and quite deadly pandemic.
Last sentence is pretty disturbing, actually, but that's really what we're facing here. And we're trying to do our best here with the Get Wisdom Project to help corral forces in opposition to this. And our method is prayer, mass prayer, which is what this episode is all about.
Yeah, as well as doing healing work, healing sessions
of course.
For people. Yes.
You asked Creator, how much did prayer factor into the resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis? Was the extraterrestrial alliance again utterly confounded by the outcome? How insecure do these changes of fortunes make them feel about humans in general? And is the repeated failures of a core component of their desire to be done with us, and are the repeated failures a core component of their desire to be done with us once and for all?
All right, and Creator tells us, here again, the expectation was that this would, in fact, trigger a nuclear holocaust. That was the desired outcome. So to have their plans fall apart was a surprise to them, but they simply attributed this to human weakness on the part of the United States, to simply not rise to the bait and have the strength and forcefulness to challenge the Russians about the bases in Cuba installing nuclear missiles pointing at the United States and take them on. We can tell you that would have been disastrous and was being championed by the military on the U.S. side. The Russians were actually more cautious about the whole matter. They were simply jockeying for political advantage, wanting to give the United States a taste of its own medicine from having the U.S. park missiles practically at Russia's doorstep in Turkey. But we're not seeking war directly. This was being maneuvered to head in that direction by the extraterrestrial alliance. But because of the high degree of animosity exhibited by these two superpowers, the likelihood of war was high, given a provocation. And that was the intention of bringing this crisis about, to create the conditions for a tipping point when one side would go too far and the other would have to answer militarily in force. And things would escalate quickly from there into a worldwide conflagration from a nuclear missile exchange that would have destroyed the majority of the human population and render much of the earth uninhabitable. The fact this was prevented was entirely due to divine intervention. So cooler heads prevailed. The ET Alliance was disappointed, but they attributed this not to human strength from being in divine alignment, which they do not believe in or understand in terms of its value. They simply further scorned and despised humans for their weakness and cowardice. And this did have the effect of causing them to hate humanity all the more, because the only thing they value is personal power and control over others, and any sign of weakness is quite loathsome because they are loveless beings.
You know, I read this with my jaw almost dropped, because it's like there's no pleasing these guys, you know? I mean, the only way you could even remotely gain their respect is to engage in a battle that ensures your own self-destruction. That's like, come on.
Well, and there's all too much human thinking that's of that level.
Yeah, true.
But that's where it comes from. That's where it comes from. Being corrupted, being downtrodden, having to fight tooth and nail, to tooth and claw to get anywhere, to even survive. It cheapens life.
Yes.
And that we get dragged down to their level. So we need to learn from all of these episodes. There's a deeper reason for the corruption and the evil that creeps into human affairs on a regular basis. We need to root it out, and we need divine help.
Indeed. You had asked Creator, the element of surprise is a key determinant in any conflict. There's a saying, there are no atheists in foxholes. When humans feel safe, like before Pearl Harbor, they pray less and or with less focus. But when feeling vulnerable, like after Pearl Harbor, their prayer work is ramped up. Does this speak to the need to pray like your life depended on it, even when danger seems far away and unlikely?
All right, and Creator tells us this is a valuable insight because, in fact, prayer can be much more effective when launched from a position of strength than when one is in desperate need. This is counterintuitive in terms of today's thinking because the very phrase you cite speaks to human nature, that when stressed and everything is on the line and safety highly uncertain, everyone will reach out to God regardless of their personal beliefs in the moment and their history. But this is done out of desperation and creates a poor platform to launch a request for a divine partnership. When this is done as a last resort because the belief is shaky and often absent, the prayer will have a weak level of belief behind it, and the divine simply cannot respond in strength to such a request. We always must follow human intention quite closely and everything that implies, including whether there is 100% belief in the divine and its ability to help, as well as belief in the self and the worthiness of oneself to have a divine intervention for the asking. Both are common areas of weakness in today's human because of the ongoing secular movement. So the admonition to pray like your life depended on it can simply be taken to mean take it seriously and give it all you've got. But when times are stable and you are wanting to have a divine partnership established as a preparation for anything that may come along that threatens human welfare, there are many, many benefits because there are many blessings one can gain from prayer, in addition to being saved from interlopers and a possible attack against humanity. There are many benefits, large and small, the divine can bring and use to help support a human who prays regularly for guidance, support, healing, and protection. People have many times difficult lives for many, many reasons, their large accumulated karmic negativity being the chief problem that requires divine assistance to work through and heal. So there is no end of projects for which divine involvement and participation can be a tremendous blessing. So there are plenty of things worthy of praying for each and every day. To have an ongoing relationship and a set of requests asked for again and again and again to cover all the bases, to help people remain safe from the many, many adverse circumstances and influences humans are subjected to, and the many challenges of life, to stay healthy, to receive upliftment, strengthening of their beliefs, sending requests for all to be raised up and healed. All are divine acts that will bring those who do so into divine alignment. That is a true statement of enlightenment, to be in a healed condition so you can stand strong and play a powerful role in things with grace and ease, regardless of what comes your way. Few are up to that task. That can only be achieved through, in most cases, many years of prayer and healing work to help the self overcome the slings and arrows of other lifetimes when a person was harmed and becomes accordingly vulnerable in the current life because of the karmic energies projecting forward. So there needs to be greater awareness of the possibilities of receiving divine help on a regular basis for all manner of things desired, and its central importance to maintaining personal integrity, growth, spiritual enlightenment, and even the survival of humanity altogether. There is much to be done to guarantee your continued advancement.
Well, certainly, of course, the message here is that, consistent, persistent prayer work over a period of time with great dedication is going to make a huge, huge difference. But, Creator said that, in desperation, it creates a poor platform. But a poor platform is better than no platform. So we don't want to have people get the idea that it's never a good time to pray. It's always better late than never.
Yes, absolutely. But Creator is only pointing out preparedness goes a long way in your spiritual life, as it does in every other aspect of your life. Preparing for bad times, preparing for a rainy day, inclement weather, a downturn in things, a loss of a job, for example, and having some provisions always around if there is somebody who gets sick, can't go out to the store, this kind of thing. The same is true in cultivating your spiritual life. Our prayer book has a single page with 9 prayers. They're relatively short, just a few lines each. It might take you 5 minutes to sit quietly once a day and read these prayers and set the intention for God to hear it and act on these prayers. And one of them is praying to help increase your faith, your belief in the divine and belief in yourself. That's something you can do to groom yourself for greater effectiveness, to call forth a divine intervention when things get dicey. So there are ways to plan and prepare, and you're not alone. You can get a very clear course of action to take with instructions. This is a prayer download ebook you can read to understand how prayer works, what makes a prayer powerful, what weakens a prayer, how to do it the most effective way. These are things that the religions haven't taught us very well. There's a lot of wasted motion in what the officialdom in the religious sector is promoting. And that's due to a kind of corruption that's crept in. Now, I don't mean to step on anyone's toes or offend anyone, but there's no time to waste in getting into divine alignment as best one can. And I think if you read our prayer book, you'll see the logic behind it. It's all logical. It all makes sense.
You can get that prayer book at getwisdom.com/prayer, getwisdom.com/prayer. And I'd like to point out that all those prayers in there, you have explored with Creator in depth to really hone each of those prayers for their maximum effectiveness.
Yes, and most of them were quoted from God directly in answer to a request for a meaningful, cogent prayer for a specific intention. Yes, like one you would use for meal and beverage blessings, or helping to take away adverse effects of medication, or general health and healing, and on and on and on, well-being and abundance. And now we have one for epidemics, removing viruses from people. This can be a very powerful thing to do. So we're going to be talking about this in our next segment. But it's something everyone can contribute to now. You don't have to attend a mass demonstration with a mask and gloves on.
Right.
You can do it from the comfort of your own home.
Yes.
And reach out and have your desires registered and on record, and they will be pooled together with others doing the same. And it will make a difference.
These prayers are really in reflection of what we have learned in this project about really what the Divine Human Project is all about, our relationship with the divine. We're not here to glorify God, though there's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying there's anything wrong with that. We're here to advance spiritually and grow in wisdom and discernment. And the divine wants us basically as self-managing beings. And so it's going to leave us alone and give us the free will to live our lives without intervention. And that's why we have to pray. The question always comes to mind, well, if God already knows what we need, why do we have to bother praying? Why can't she just deliver it up? Because that's not the way it works. You know, yeah, God probably does know what we want ahead of time, but that doesn't take away the requirement that we still have to ask for it.
Yeah, it's the same. If you're a parent, you send your kids off to school, you don't go with them to take their tests for them and answer the teacher's questions to their kid for them. They're on their own. They have to sink or swim, learn the rules, grow the knowledge, and perform. That's the world we have. We're in charge of it. We can ask for help, especially when things get tough, and should.
Yes.
So that's our safety net.
Yes.
But we have to use it. And again, it's the same paradigm. We have to do it. We have to make the request. Otherwise, the divine is powerless. Those are the rules of engagement.
Yes, and there's a lot of exploration that we have done and probably will do in the future to parse out the reasons for that and why it is the way it is. But yes, we are here certainly to become masters of our own lives with assistance and partnership with the divine. But we're here all on a mission, every single one of us. And now we got a really big mission in front of us, which is handle this coronavirus. This is a big, big test, which we're going to explore in more detail in our next segment. Be sure, again, check us out. Check out our healing services at getwisdom.com. On our menu is a healing tab. You can check out all the different healing services that are available. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to the final segment of Get Wisdom. We are talking this week about the power of collective prayer and how it can deliver miracles for individuals and for humanity. Carl, you asked Creator, the attack on 9/11 caught the world, and especially Americans, by surprise. In the aftermath, a lot of prayers have been said. Is that the reason another 9/11 type event has not occurred until now? Assuming, of course, that the coronavirus is a much worse danger than what manifested on 9/11/2001.
All right, and Creator tells us this, in fact, is the case. While many would say there was a worldwide conflagration that happened in the wake of 9/11, that is a relative thing. For those in the war-torn countries that were decimated, and as a consequence of the retaliation of the United States against nations perceived to harbor the terrorist perpetrator organization believed responsible for the 9/11 attacks, that was still a small portion of the world, other than scattered acts of terrorism done by disaffected Muslim fundamentalists seeking to attack the West because they have been corrupted to believe it is a religious calling. This is the mirror image of the Western armies thinking they were achieving a kind of revenge, as well as ensuring safety of the homeland by carrying the fight to the foreign lands believed to be the origin of the attackers, where their true enemies were hiding and needed to be reined in and annihilated if possible. These were all misguided interpretations of the event itself and made things much, much worse. But they were still much less severe in total consequences than was possible, given the potential for human vengeance to be ramped up and the many who could be motivated among the Muslim community to mount concerted efforts to attack America yet again. There were many potential scenarios and many plans, from the fantasy stage to preliminary networking and configuration of supplies and financial support needed, and so on, to do many counterattacks. Many of these were thwarted or greatly limited through being overpowered or through the ineptness of the planners. Many of the latter events were the result of divine intervention, and there were many times when the savagery of the American forces and their allies were manipulated through encouragement to stand down a bit and take more time in planning and preparation and allowing more intelligence data to be generated and so forth. This served to reduce the overall savagery of what took place, so there were many ways that we helped both sides simply to reduce the degree of the death toll on both sides. That is not playing favorites. That is simply providing a path to divinity, if only for a short while. But it does reduce the karmic burden for any who are blessed in taking a better road and not engaging in severe depravity to create huge soul wounds in the bargain. So it has now come around to the need for another initiative of a grand nature designed to do a major softening up by wreaking havoc on the human population in causing mass death. That is the purpose of the current outbreak of COVID-19, to cause a global pandemic of a very severe nature. Time will tell if that succeeds or will be attenuated through divine intervention. It is up to the humans, who are the only ones who can request for this to happen. We cannot do it unilaterally. Even though we are sympathetic to the human cause, they must always be the driving force in making requests for the divine assistance.
You know, a thought occurs. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. A thought occurred to me that in this channeling, that it's important sometimes to ask for what is highest and best, because I think sometimes we may not know what is highest and best when we're offering up the prayer, and sometimes it might be advantageous to leave that up to the divine. You wouldn't think that if you were an American praying for, victory against terrorism, that one of the effects of that prayer would be the softening of the savagery of the American forces. But that's exactly what we're told here.
Yes. Well, we cannot anticipate all the strategies the divine might use.
Yes.
It's subtle, it's elegant, and it is inscrutable because it's hidden from inspection. So we have to do the best we can. And we talk a lot in our prayer ebook about how to construct prayers in a meaningful way. And part of that is really trying to make the desires as specific as possible and what is truly needed from the human perspective as best one can. So rather than just a general prayer, help me, save me, make it specific. Get this virus out of my life, take it out of my body, take it out of all the people I know, and go from there and do it again and again and again for everyone on the planet.
Yes.
Okay, that is a prayer with a focus, with a purpose that's defined, not just help us survive. Well, what does that mean? Those who are strong enough to resist the virus to survive and the rest die? I mean, you're not saying,
But we are leaving a lot up to the divine in the sense that you can get too specific and start saying, please give us a vaccine to solve this problem. Well, then you're going to be limiting the divine's response,
And that's a human solution after all, and maybe not the best one, maybe not even possible given the nature of the virus. So yes, we have to make a fine line here. And so we're going to give you a recommended prayer to use for this.
Absolutely. You ask Creator, coronavirus presents a true threat to all of humanity. Can Creator comment on how the divine will use prayers from all religions and cultures to combat this scourge? Would it be worth the time and energy to email Creator's prayer for the removal of all viruses to thousands of clergy and pastors in the hope that some will be inspired to share the same or similar with their congregations, but perhaps attributing it to inspiration and not channeling?
All right, and Creator tells us the divine realm routinely uses the aggregate sum total of prayer requests of a given type with a common intention or closely related intention to help govern the deployment of divine energy in accordance with the human outreach. If you think about the sheer number of humans, a significant percentage of whom will be praying at any one moment, there are many prayers in common for all kinds of things, asking for assistance both personally, for loved ones, and for the broader groups of people associated with, including all of humanity or all on the earth in the various ways this might be stated. So this becomes a giant energetic equation because it is all a matter of energy. The energy of human intention divided by the number of potential targets allowable, because there is a concordance of intention in a particular target and outcome. But the divine will make the most of prayer intentions to do its work and do the utmost to help humanity in all ways at all times. It is up to humans to share the cleverness of advancements they may contribute to in better understanding how to pray effectively and make the most of divine capability, which will be the key to human survival and success. If humans do not partner with the divine, they will be doomed. It is that simple. We take no delight in yet again pointing this out, but people deserve to know that when they neglect their spiritual growth, they are giving up their future and will end up alone and suffering on their own with no hope of rescue. That can only be provided to believers in the divine who believe in themselves as well. That takes cultivation to develop belief to a high degree, and that is essential for success here, for prayers to count. At the present time, there are only a very low percentage of humans who are capable of effective prayer because they're truly in divine alignment and pray in a way that can get the intended results and are not squandering the opportunity on a kind of make-work exercise of some kind, praying for something that is irrelevant, or praying in a way that negates the very possibility of the prayer being answered. There are many prayers designed to disempower the humans using them. We have discussed this with you before. There are pitfalls and a very large degree of ignorance in how to pray in the most effective fashion. In this regard, the prayer you are using for the current viral epidemic is a good object lesson in how to pray for something of this kind effectively. It would be a blessing to share this in whatever way you can conceive of with the greater world. So we encourage any and all who hear these words to participate however you can in doing such an outreach. Clergy are always looking for sources of inspiration to have something new and fresh to say. So offering something innovative has a good chance of catching their attention, at least. You can also be sure that whenever that happens, the divine will be there to pat them on the back and give them encouragement to pay attention, to greatly consider this suggestion, and to help them feel good about the words they see and the idea it represents. So they will get divine encouragement within, reinforcing the potential benefit and wisdom in using the opportunity to full advantage.
Well, it's a little disconcerting to hear Creator say that there's very, very few humans today that are really praying effectively.
Well, but you see, you can pray to have people pray.
Yes.
So this is this can be a beautiful thing, and spreading the word about this can be a beautiful thing. That's what we're doing with Get Wisdom, trying to get the word out. So let's give these good folks our prayer, so we get that out there before we run out of time.
Yes, because we are moving along quickly, aren't we here? Okay, you ask Creator, here is a proposed prayer to help the coronavirus epidemic. Source Creator, each and every day, remove or render harmless all dangerous viruses from myself, my loved ones, and then from all infected beings and the earth as a whole. Apply this prayer again and again as needed to keep everyone safe and restore well-being to the afflicted. Is this an effective prayer for widespread use, or does it need modification?
And Creator tells us this prayer is ideal. It has all of the requisite components for an effective prayer. First, it asks the divine to enact the prayer each and every day. This can make up for a lack of vigilance on the part of a person launching the prayer. Second, it adopts the idea about targeting removal or inactivation of the virus in addition to doing active protection and healing. That by far is the quickest and most effective strategy the divine realm can use. We have explained why this is a powerful idea, because the virus is easier to remove or inactivate than it is for the divine to prevent people from becoming vulnerable or to heal them once they are infected. And that is for reasons of karmic complications, not that the divine lacks power. This prayer will avoid the dilution effect of asking the divine to only help all, assuming you will be protected and healed fully. But being an individual, your spiritual capital may not be enough to do the job when spread so thin. This modification puts the self first, then asks for the prayer to be acted on again and again for the rest to be helped. This is the ideal prayer strategy for large-scale endeavors.
I'd like to point out that this episode, like all other episodes of Get Wisdom, are available in the Voice America archives. So if you want to go back, please indeed check out this show, and you can take your time and actually copy down the exact prayer word for word. You can also get our prayer book, which also has this prayer word for word. So you can get it at getwisdom.com/prayer, getwisdom.com/prayer. But, even if you can't remember the exact words, it would if you're driving along in the car and you just happen to think about it, it'd probably be well to even say, God, remove this virus from the earth.
Yes, you can't go wrong praying. You can't overdo it. As God has said, you will not wear us out.
Yes.
So don't be faint of heart. You have standing. You're a part of the divine. You are blessed, and you are one of God's children, and that is your birthright. So use it. Act as though you know this to be so, and it shall be so, because the Almighty is waiting for your vote to come in. Do you want assistance, or are you going to take a pass and handle things on your own? People will decide that every day with their lives.
Well, just like prayer should be repeated, we're going to repeat one more time. Get the prayer book at getwisdom.com/prayer. Carl, we are out of time, and we'll look forward to another show next week.
Take care and be well.